it is incredibly overwhelming for me that people from around the world and people from Romania have embraced my book and have really enjoyed it. That's just incredibly gratifying to me, and that is a beautiful cover. I
Yeah,
love
that
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 cover.
is the book.
Uh,
Yeah.
yes, and thank you. I mean, it's just incredibly gratifying as a writer that people from around the world are able to identify with the book, and so I'm so happy to be here. And
Thank you for accepting our invitation. So, my first question would be about the title. It's an amazing title. It sounds great in English. The Blacktop Wasteland. This sounds great in Romanian. Pustiul de asfalt. I was wondering, what does it mean to you? How did you come up with the title? And if it is a reference to T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland.
it is a reference to T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and a lot of people don't get that, so I appreciate that. Uh, that's
Thanks.
interesting. A lot of people don't get that, and so it is a reference to The Wastelands, a poem by T.S. Eliot. And it came to me because where I live, there are a lot of open roads, a lot of countryside, and it can sometimes feel like you're trapped in this wasteland, this, and you can't escape. And all the roads here are blacktop roads. They're covered with asphalt. And so those images sort of came together in my mind to create the title. And it was a reference to the wastelands because the main character of the book, is someone who is going through a lot of different things, and he feels like his world is falling apart, which is sort of what the Wasteland poem is about. And so those were the two things that came together to create the title.
It's an amazing book. It's a great story. I think it's a universal story at that. But it also appears steeped in the social, political, and human history of Virginia. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that, because I'm not sure if all of us know all the history behind it. And
Mhm.
the second part of the question would be: do you think that the this background, which you are going to talk to us about, if it creates a certain lens through which we should read the Blacktop Wasteland?
Yeah, I think I'll answer the first part. So Virginia is one of the first colonies in America in the New World. It was also the first place that Africans were brought as slaves in 1619. And it has always been, I think, one of the places that is a focal point of racial and social awareness. And so even now, in 2021, there is a lot of there can be a lot of racial animus, a lot of racial unrest. Virginia was the home of the Confederacy during the American Civil War from 1860 to 1865. And so there's a history here that it envelops everyone that lives in Virginia, white, black, Native Americans, everyone is a part of that history. And so the book talks about that history and how my main character, Bug, who is an African American man, how that history shapes his life and his choices or his lack of choices. If you read the book, Bug is a very intelligent character, and in a different place, in a different setting, he may have been an engineer. He could have been, someone who had done something else. But because of the social and racial situations that he grew up in, he finds himself kind of trapped in a life of crime. And even at the beginning of the book, as he has tried to separate himself from that life, uh, economic situations force him back. Just for some people who haven't read the book, Bug is a driver for criminal enterprises. So he's a getaway driver. And so at the beginning of the book, he's moved away from that lifestyle, but his business is starting to fail. His mother is very ill and she requires medical help, and he has children who require the things children require, and so he is tempted to go back into the criminal lifestyle. And I think a lot of that is because of where he lives and where he is, and having grown up in Virginia as an African American man, I identified with and wanted to talk about those issues. But however, to answer the second part of your question, I think the the lens through which you can read Blacktop Wasteland can be universal, because I think at the end of the day, the issues of poverty, of economic instability, are issues that anyone can understand and identify with. I think if whether you're in Virginia or whether you're in Transylvania, or whether you're in Bucharest, you can understand about not having enough money to pay for the food that you need to eat, or not having enough money to pay your bills, and how terrifying that can be, or not being able to provide for the people that you love. And so I think that gives the book a sort of universal feel, but you can also look at it as a book talking about the specific issues that exist in America and exist in the American South.
You are the winner of several very important literary prizes for a book, I might add, that is crime fiction. So that's something that I think is very important to notice, that crime fiction is also appreciated by literary circles. I was wondering what these awards mean for you, and if, in your view, is it more important to be read by as many people as possible, or to have literary recognition, acknowledgement?
That's a really good question. For me, the awards are an acknowledgement. I mean, and that's obvious. I think to be honest, as a human being, it feels good to be acknowledged. It feels good to be acknowledged by people who are academics, people who are students of writing. And so that feels good. And on a personal level, my background, I grew up in a very how can I say? I grew up in a setting that we didn't have a lot of money. We were very poor, and so we struggled a lot. And so to have those awards, it is somewhat. It feels like I have escaped that struggle to a certain extent. That I have achieved certain things despite the difficulties of my childhood and my background. So that's important. But ultimately, for me as a writer, it's more important to me that people read my work and enjoy it and take something from it. If I never win another award, but people still read my work, then that is gratifying for me. That's what I want.
Let's delve a bit into the book. So the main character, as you said, his nickname is Bug. His actual name is Beauregard Montague. And he's actually the hero of another one of your texts, a short story that's called Slant 6. I was wondering, how do we leave him off there, and how do we find him here? And how did he become the protagonist of a full novel?
Well, thank you for that question. So Slant 6 was written before Blacktop Wasteland, and I created that character book just for that story. I wanted to write a story about a father and a son, and a moment in their lives when the father is trying to tell the son that he's leaving, and so things happen in that story that are intense, and it's interesting. For me, characters are like my friends, and Bug became my friend. I wrote that story, and then a year later, I just kept thinking about him, and I kept thinking about, I wonder what he's up to, I wonder what he's doing, and so I started writing the book that became Blacktop Wasteland. And I just started writing about him and what his life was like after that moment in the story. And he really just became this character that I fell in love with. And I wanted to tell a larger story about him. And as I told that larger story, he changed a little bit. I think in Slant 6, he's more of a true criminal. He hasn't redeemed himself. Whereas in Blacktop Wasteland, he's less a criminal and more just a man caught in a very bad situation. And I think in Blacktop Wasteland, I humanized him. He became more of a relatable character. But he's a character that Blacktop Wasteland, the book, changed my life. It really did. I would love to revisit Bug again someday. I'd love to write another story about him, because he's a character that, like I said, had a great effect on my life. I went from working 60 or 70 hours a week at a hardware store to writing books full time, and Blacktop Wasteland made that possible. So I think I owe Bug another story. I think I owe him another chance at redemption. So, but he is a character that came to me fully formed. I just he just came into my mind one day, and I wanted to talk about it. And I'm very grateful for what has done for me.
Another one of the main characters, let's say, is surprisingly a car, a Plymouth Duster to be exact. And the car becomes a character in its own right. And Bug almost creates like a human bond with it. He feels the car. I was wondering, why did you choose a Duster?
Well, another great question. My father, when I was a little boy, my father had a Duster, and a lot of my life experiences influenced and inspired Blacktop Wasteland. And one of those experiences was when my mother and father separated. My father took me out for I don't know what they're called in Romania, but milkshakes, ice cream. He took me out for ice cream, and he told me that him and my mother were separating, and that had a really profound effect on me. And he had a car. His Duster was black. He had a black Duster, not a red one. But and also I love American cars. Those cars from that time period, the American muscle car. But also it is a metaphor. I think because for me, growing up in America, growing up in Virginia, it is where I grew up at. There's no public transportation, and so if you don't have a car, you have to walk everywhere. And in America, a car is like this symbol of freedom and expression, and you feel like you can escape, in a car. You can jump in a car in America and drive anywhere you want for 3 or 4 hours, and you can start a whole new life, And so the car becomes this symbol for Bug of this life that he wants, but it's difficult for him to achieve it.
When I read the book, my first reaction was, this reads sort of like a Greek tragedy, an ancient tragedy, where the characters are kind of forced into doing something which they don't necessarily want, and it's bad, but that's their destiny, let's say. However, my question still stands. Do you think your characters are a product of their own choices, or is it some fatal destiny that like surges above them?
Yeah. I think if it was a Greek mythological story or a Roman mythological story, I would say that their fates are already destined. But because it's a more humanistic story, no, Bug's fate is the product of his own choices. He makes bad choices. He makes bad decisions, and they have consequences. Deadly consequences for the people that he loves. And so I think Bugs to go back to the classic or mythological comparison. I think Bug is a victim of his own hubris because he is supremely confident in his own skills, and he should be, because he is smart, because he is driven, because he is a man of focus. But that still doesn't mean that he should make the choices that he does. And I think Bug, if you asked him, he would tell you, I make those choices because I know I can succeed. But if you ask me as the writer, he makes those choices because of a little bit of arrogance and a little bit of hubris. And just like Greek or Roman mythological heroes, it's the hubris that brings him down. It's the hubris that brings Perseus down, or Hercules, or someone like that. And it's the hubris that brings Bug down. His arrogance is a little bit, and his immaturity, his inability to move on, to let the car go. At one point in the book, his wife, when they're having a conversation about their financial difficulties, his wife tells him to sell the car, and he refuses. And that's a sign of his immaturity. He's not able to let go of the past. And though I think that and his hubris is what ultimately leads to his destiny. I think we all have choices. I don't think anything is predestined, and all of our choices have consequences, and so does Bugs.
Who or what was your inspiration for becoming a writer, or a crime writer, more specific?
Well, my inspiration for becoming a writer I had a teacher when I was a kid, and I was a very unruly kid in class. I got in trouble a lot because I love to talk, and I was always trying to be funny. I was always trying to be the clown, and I had a teacher who pulled me aside one day, and he said, "I want you to write down for me what all these jokes and ideas that you talk about during class that gets you in trouble. Write them down." And I did that, and he read it, and he told me, he said, have you ever thought about being a writer? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, I think you can do it. You have a very unique voice. You have talent. And he sort of inspired me to take it seriously, to become a writer. And then later on, I started writing crime fiction because when I first started writing, I wanted to write science fiction. I wrote fantasy, and it didn't connect with people. Nobody bought it. It didn't sell. And I always had loved and enjoyed crime fiction, but I didn't think that I had the ability to write it. And I went to see a crime writer, a very famous crime writer named Walter Mosley. He was doing a lecture at a university, and I went up to him and he signed my book. I have it actually; it's up here. He signed my book, and he asked me, "Was I a writer?" And I said, "Well, I've been trying, but I haven't had a lot of success." And he said, "Oh, do you write? Do you like mysteries? Do you like crime?" I said, "I like them, but I don't think I can write them because I live in a small town, and I don't think anybody's interested in what goes on in a small town." And he looked at me and he said, "Make them interested. Make them interested in what goes on that town." And it just, I don't know, it's something that clicked with me. It just made me think. And I went home and I wrote my first crime novel, which is a book called My Darkest Prayer. It's only in the United States, but a small publisher. And from then on, it just worked. There's something about crime fiction that allows me to talk about a multitude of issues that I find important. Not just social issues, but issues about humanity and what it means to be a man or what it means to be a family, and the bonds of friendship, all those things. For me, crime fiction is the best prism through which to study those issues. And I am so, so, so grateful that I have the opportunity to do that and that people have connected with it the way they have.
Your next novel, Razor Blade Tears, it's official. We are going to publish it, probably translated by the same person who did a phenomenal job with Blacktop Wasteland.
That's wonderful.
His name is Dan Dobosh. He's actually a science fiction writer. He's one of the
wow.
current writers. So, could you tell us a bit about Razor Blade Tears?
Yeah, certainly. So Razor Blade Tears is the story of two fathers, one black, one African American, one white, who are both ex-prisoners, and they both have served time, and their sons are gay, and their sons are married. And as the book begins, the sons have been murdered. And so the fathers decide to investigate the murder because they don't feel the police are doing a good job. But they also are investigating the murder to get revenge for their children and also redeem themselves because neither father was accepting of their son's lifestyle. And now that their sons are dead, they feel an immense sense of guilt and grief. And so these two very tragic, violent men go on a path of vengeance to get justice for their sons. And it's very intense. It's very different than Blacktop Wasteland because these two characters are I would say they're more toxic masculinity than tragic. And they have to learn to be better men through the course of the book. And so it's very violent, it's very intense, but it's also, I think, a lot of heart because it's a lot about grief and it's a lot about guilt and it's a lot about finding redemption and being a better person. I wrote this book. My mother had passed away, and so this book really allowed me to process my grief with that and deal with that. And so I think people will enjoy it. I hope they will. Like I said, it's a little different than Blacktop Wasteland. It's not as many car chases, but it's a very it's a very intense book. And I think the two characters I think they grow on you. They're a little rough in the beginning, but by the middle of the book, you can see that they are trying to be better men. I'm fascinated with in my writing the idea of being a better person and what does that look like and how do you achieve that? What type of work goes into changing and being a better person? And I'm fascinated with that and the idea of identity. Who are we and what choices have made us the people that we are. And so this book is a little bit about that too. The choices that these two fathers have made, these poor choices that they've made, and how those have affected them and the people around them. And so hopefully people will enjoy it. I'm so glad that you guys are publishing, and I'm so glad it's being translated by the same person again. I think they did a wonderful job, and so I'm excited for people in Romania to experience.